Air raid sirens rang out in Tel Aviv and surrounding towns. And 2 rockets fired from Gaza crashed into open areas or disintegrated en route. Hamas later claimed those rockets were launched by mistake. But Israel responded throughout the night with airstrikes on some 100 Hamas-linked targets in Gaza. Today, the Islamist militant group canceled its weekly Friday protests at the Israel-Gaza border for the first time in nearly a year. With the rocket attacks coming just 25 days before a national election, it's inevitable they would become a political issue. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Gaza policy today was the target of criticism from politicians on both his left and right.
We must return the initiative to our hands, to adopt an ongoing tough policy, and in such a way that Hamas will want to go back to absolute quiet, just as it had at the end of Operation Protective Shield. And after we achieve this, not to waste 3.5 years and do nothing with them, but to turn to other channels.
The Israeli response to the missile attacks on Tel Aviv is pathetic. I have to tell the truth. I cannot imagine that Putin would have explained to the Russians, after missiles fired at Moscow, that the enemy did it by mistake. It is time for a 180-degree reverse policy. There are no more excuses. I call on the Prime Minister to lead a strong campaign against Hamas, and if he does not know how to do it, to give someone else the security portfolio.
Well, joining me in the studio is Yaakov Lapin. He is a research associate at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. We'll also be speaking with our senior Middle East correspondent, Mohammed Al-Qassam. But first, let's go down to the Gaza border area and our diplomatic correspondent, Eli Hochenberg. And Eli, we just heard briefly from Benny Gantz, the Blue and White Party leader, but also former IDF chief of staff, lots of military experience with Gaza. What did you hear from him there?
Yes, Galev. So a calm day here at the Gaza border in the aftermath of Israeli airstrikes that followed, of course, the 2 rockets launched towards the Tel Aviv metropolitan and a round of rockets launched towards the southern communities here along the Israel-Gaza border. And Benny Gantz, the main challenger of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in these elections, indeed arrived here to the Nahal Oz community where we are at now a few hours ago, criticizing Netanyahu and his government's policy vis-a-vis Hamas ruling the Gaza Strip, of course, but failed to suggest any alternatives or alternative policies, rather, when it comes to addressing the Gaza question. Perhaps more alarming from the Prime Minister's standpoint is the criticism from the right side of the political map, this policy of containment, quote-unquote, as it is being dubbed by right-wing leaders. And this Sunday, Netanyahu will, of course, arrive at the weekly cabinet meeting and also a pre-set security cabinet meeting that will also be dealing with the unfolding events that we've seen in the past 24 hours. But as of now, a calm day here in the Gaza border.
And I just want to update some information just out. The Iron Dome anti-missile system was not, according to the Israeli media, was not actually activated last night, as many people had assumed. We should note that Iron Dome is supposed to only react when it senses those missiles are heading towards populated areas, apparently the rockets, and that wasn't the case here. Let me just go in studio now to Yaakov Lapin. And Yaakov, we heard Benny Gantz making his recommendations. Of course, it's easy when you're not in the Prime Minister's chair to say what to do about Gaza. How do you think that Israel, in this case, the government reacted rightly to this incident, and how should it move going forward?
Yeah, I think that what happened was that there was a great deal of fog surrounding the identity and the motivation of this rocket attack. And as the fog dispersed and the intelligence community worked very quickly to figure out who fired it, Hamas, and why the intelligence community in Israel accepted the narrative that this was an accident. So they tailored their response in a way that would reinforce Israeli deterrence, striking 100 targets, which is a very large number, across the Gaza Strip, but very few casualties and a few injuries. So Hamas lost a lot of military high-value targets, but the Israeli response did not lead to a wider escalation. So what we saw was a very sophisticated response, in my view, in a way that reinforced Israeli deterrence, but did not drag the region into a security deterioration.
Mohammed, I want to pick up on this one thing Yaakov said, which is Israel determining and that this was a mistaken launch. That seems something that is a little quite difficult to accept, how something like this could happen as an accident. Is that your analysis?
It is difficult to suggest that by mistake 2 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip. And we're not talking about projectiles. We're talking about somewhat sophisticated rockets with a medium distance capabilities. They had to travel some 40 miles from the Gaza Strip, reaching the middle of the country. So to say that they were fired by mistake, it's a little bit hard to believe. 1 maybe could be the case, but 2 is difficult. And that takes us to, okay, if 2 of them were fired, why and by whom? And we have seen in the last few weeks and even in the last few days that Hamas is under tremendous pressure in the Gaza Strip. There is, for 2 days in a row now, protest by Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, protesting the high prices, protesting the increase in taxes that Hamas has implemented, and also protesting the daily hardship that they have to go through and live in. They understand it's the Israeli blockade being imposed on the Palestinian coastal enclave, but more so that the lack of progress led by the Hamas movement, which has been involved in negotiations via the Egyptian delegations, Egyptian officials, that has not really achieved anything. Hamas is under pressure, and this could be the result of an infighting within the Islamist movement.
And in fact, Yaakov, didn't you just write a paper suggesting that Hamas could almost provoke Israel to some kind of strong response because of those dire economic conditions?
Absolutely. Hamas is in a very strategic, problematic, distress situation. It has to either choose to support itself and find a way out of this economic black hole, which could cause an implosion in the Gaza Strip and a rebellion, which is the worst thing that Hamas could imagine, because it would destroy its image as the leader of the Palestinian struggle. Or if it sees that situation starts to unfold, it could provoke a war with Israel to divert attention and throw all of its problems aside into Israel's direction. So, yes, the tension is very high, and I think this is the real strategic situation. Whether or not these rockets were fired deliberately or not is less important. What's important now is what Israel will do in the long term, and what the international community will do, and what Hamas will do, and the Palestinian Authority, to try and defuse the ticking bomb and the pressure cooker situation that is the Gaza Strip.